What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. As always, I feel like I get bored saying this, but follow me on Twitter at Conspiracy or JAC, on Gab. I have a website, conspiracyorjustacoincidence.com. You can, I got shirts there and all this stuff. If you want to support the show, I have a link on my website. Thanks to all the supporters. Thanks to the people that leave reviews. It's honestly, it like makes me so happy that you enjoy the work I put in it. I feel like I'm on a mission. I don't know what mission yet, but I really appreciate all the support, guys. So thanks for, and if you haven't left a review, please do. Even constructive criticism, I always say this, I will accept it wholeheartedly. And even though sometimes they hurt my feelings, I appreciate it because I want it to be an enjoyable experience for you to listen to. So today's episode is super long. Well, it's going to be a two-parter because it's like crazy long, crazy long. I think this one will be like almost an hour and 45 minutes. We'll see how fast I talk. But we're going to talk about Laurel Canyon. Now, I did a show with my boy Bob's Lessons a few days ago or last week. And we briefly talked about like Laurel Canyon. And for those of you who don't know, Laurel Canyon is like the epicenter of the hippie movement, the rock and roll movement, right? And Bob and I talked about it. He read the book too, I think, as well. Yeah, he definitely did. I told his story last time. He when we first met, he was talking about Laurel Canyon, and I had no idea what he was talking about. I never heard that at all, and I didn't tell him at the time. But that was like a beginning of my, I first started reading. But still, like, so anyway, it's the hippie movement, 60s and 70s. And what do you know? As we've like all known, it was a propaganda epicenter, right? It started the hippie movement. It created this narrative that and influenced public opinion. It influenced a whole generation. And this is my dad listens to my show. Dad, thanks for always listening. And this is going to hurt him because he has friends that went to Woodstock. He was born in 1949, so this is his era, right? This music. He loves the Beatles. He knows all these bands, and it's what they do today, right? Like, I mean, think about just rap music. Who I used to be a big listener of rap music. That probably led me down my struggles because I thought it was cool to like sell drugs and do drugs, all those things. I thought it was so cool. That's like what made you be like a badass or like a man or something. Even though I grew up in a loving two-parent suburban household, but it influences you, right? I mean, look at the inner city populations and what they think is how to be like a man or how to make money or whatever it is. It influences you. And as much as you might want to say like it doesn't, it absolutely does, right? It's like, look at the arc since when rap music turned into like, this crime ridden, degenerate, illegal promoting activities. I mean, incarcerations directly related to those increases. Before that, and then you had the hippie movement. So it's this pattern they use. It has huge power, huge. And if you would think that the government or the deep state or whatever you want to call them, the cabal, would allow somebody with a huge platform to speak their own opinion without them having a say, you're like very naive or ignorant to this fact. So let's get started. I have like some photos. I was going to do a big photo thing, but I take so much time putting up notes that like I don't. So I'll share the screen. Let me pull it up real quick. I got too many screens up. All right. So we can pull up some photos every now and again. But yeah. Okay. Let's do it like this. Alrighty, I'll make me a little bigger if you're watching on YouTube. Perfect. Nice. Okay, so here we go. So Laurel Canyon, and this is from Weird Scenes in the Canyon, McGowan. Sorry, I don't have his first name. Just look up Weird Scenes if you want to. I did my best to like get all the notes because there's so many connections. It's insane. Like I pretty much like highlighted the whole book. That's why I have to do it in two parts because it's like too much. So 1913, Laurel Canyon was an undeveloped slice of LA wilderness. Tons of nature, as everything was at one point. A guy named Charles Spencer, he was started buying up land on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, as well as Lookout Mountain, which we'll get to that. He made this like 70-room inn, sweeping views of the Pacific Ocean, horses, burns down, 1923, built something new, 2,000 square feet, dining, like huge building known as the Log Cabin. I was going to pull up a picture of that because it's kind of cool and it's kind of relevant too. So here it is, if you're looking at the screens. So it's literally a log cabin, right? It gets bought by a guy named Tom Mix, who changed the name of the log cabin. And there's tons and tons of secret passageways all underneath this. Always a good thing. You know, I would love to have a house with tons of secret passages, but tunnels like all through the yard, hidden chambers, like electricity in all these places. Crazy place. So early 1900s was of California. It was still Wild Wild West. If you ever played Red Dead Redemption, that's the only video game like I've ever played in the new video game era, and it's like amazing. But yeah, so you had like vigilante groups. Like the mayor couldn't stop the vigilante groups. Sometimes I think it would be good to probably bring vigilante and pitchforks back. But anyway, so there was like just say like 8 celebrity residents of Laurel Canyon before it like really surged in popularity. 4 died on occult holidays. The one guy, Martin Wallace, died inside a mental institution of a morphine addiction. I don't know how you die if you're institutionalized of a morphine addiction, but he did. 31 years old. Another guy, Tom Mix, died lowly down a stretch of the Arizona highway. It was a single car crash on October 12th, same birthday as Crowley. They said it was like, so this is like, there's gonna be so many of these stories like this. So this guy, some construction workers saw the car crash that killed him, and it wasn't killed by the car crash. He was killed by a severe blow to the back of the head and neck. There was an aluminum case he had in the back of his car seat. You know, so like, did he die of a car crash or did someone whack him in the back of the head, right? Harry Houdini, who we're going to get into later, probably the next episode, but he was a spy, dude. Crazy. He was a spy, but he dies Halloween Day because of that punch to the gut, which, you know, I feel like everyone knows that story. He was showing how strong, where his abs were, but like, doctors say that that's very unlikely, if not impossible. It was probably poisoning. He was given some serum in the hospital. His wife also got it, but she survived. His death came 8 years after another death in the same house during Halloween. The owner had to leave after like bribing the juries there because his son like killed somebody, and then Houdini ended up buying the house. 33 years after Houdini buys the house, it burns down, remains undisturbed for 50 years. But like I said, Houdini was involved with the intelligence communities, Secret Service, Scotland Yard. They used his profession to travel and get accepted into countries that they wanted to get more information about. And also like John Wilkes Booth. And we'll get into all this stuff, but they've been using the entertainment industry to spy forever, dude, forever. So then in 1941, the U.S. military buys up a nice 2.5 acres of Wonderland Park as the Lookout Mountain Laboratory. I don't know if there's any photos of that, but I mentioned that in my nuke episode. But so it's 100,000 square feet. Here it is. It has a helicopter pad, 17 climate-controlled film vaults, a bomb shelter, 19,000 motion pictures, ran by the Air Force, probably to make footage, of the atomic bombs and nuke tests. So, always good. Cutting edge of new film tech would start there, 3D, all this stuff. And of course, you had famous people like John Ford. Hopefully that's the right name. Well, sometimes I type too fast. Jimmy Stewart, Reagan worked there, did work there. Bing Crosby, Walt Disney, Monroe, all an undisclosed project. About 250 producers, probably Kubrick, I imagine, had some experience there or got his camera stuff there. All top secret clearance, remained unknown to the public until the 1990s, as all good secrets remain. So Laurel Canyon was home to the hippest young actors: Marlon Brando, James Dean, Dennis Hopper, Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood, I don't know that actress, but I'm sorry for you like film buffs. She lived in the same house as Cass Elliot would live in, who we'll get into. Dennis Hopper, just all these people. Oh, Laurel Canyon, and this was interesting. Laurel Canyon science fiction writer Robert Heinlein. He got, worked out Lookout Mountain Avenue, or lived at Lookout Mountain Avenue, right by the base, which you'll find all these famous people lived right by this ironically, this movie producing, entertainment producing base, which started before Laurel Canyon in 1947. They all live right by it. Wild, right? I wonder, just such a weird coincidence. But so Robert Heinlein, he was a graduate of the Naval Academy, very right wing, but his work was loved by the hippies. He wrote Stranger in a Strange Land. And if you don't know that book, that was a huge influence on Charlie Manson and lots of others. He is like the same biography as L. Ron Hubbard. Zappa was a huge fan of him. Crosby was a huge fan of him, probably because they all worked together in that, in this intelligence group. But yeah, so entertainers who are also intelligence ops were at Lookout since its earliest days. So you find like a band that's taking the country by storm. Miles down the road lives another guy who's about to reach stardom, who's married to a girl you attended kindergarten with. Her dad, like yours, was in atomic weapons research. Her husband's dad is involved with chemical warfare, who happens to have a cousin who also fronts a rock band on the verge of superstardom. And this third rock star also lives a mile down from the home from you. So that's the kind of, and it keeps, these are all going to be specific people, but I'm like setting up so you can see the odds of this happening. Then another mile down the road lives two kids who are also in a rock and roll band, who, wouldn't you know, attended the same Alexandria, Virginia high school that you attended. And then one of them also attended Annapolis, just like your dad did, and your kindergarten's friend's dad did. And all of you hail from Washington, D.C., and you all find yourselves in a canyon of California right next to a military installation. What are the odds, right, guys? There was a calling to this space. Wow. So chapter 1. I don't know if I'll read all the chapters, but it gives me time to anyway. Okay. All right. So first week of August 1964, the event it's like probably like step 1 of conspiracy or truth research. 1964, U.S. warships under Navy Admiral George Morrison become under attack while patrolling Vietnam's Tonkin Gulf. This is one of the first like psyops I would bring up to people that you're like red pilling, because it's long ago. They don't feel too sensitive about it, and they come out and say it. But it was the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which brought us into Vietnam. It was a lie. So then they started Operation Rolling Thunder. Bombs, missiles, chemical warfare, all dumped on the people of Vietnam. Of course, there's none of that's war crimes, even though war crimes, they don't really make any, it's war. So, but anyway. So in 1965, the first uniformed soldier steps foot on Vietnam. And that's an important distinction because there were not uniformed soldiers like spies and special forces that were there for at least 4 years prior. So that was in 1964, and here we go. 1965, a new scene takes shape in this isolated Laurel Canyon that's heavily wooded, rustic, and like bees with honey, you have musicians, actors, singers, songwriters. They all begin to gather there, and they form the Flower Child movement soundtrack for the 1960s. So first to drop the album are the Byrds, who I've heard of the Byrds. I was more into Motown, so I know like the main stuff. But yeah, so the biggest star will be David Crosby. You have John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas, Frank Zappa, Buffalo Springfield, The Doors, which is Jim Morrison, who's one of the most iconic figures in Laurel Canyon. So what do you know? Jim is the son of the Admiral George Stephen Morrison, who was on the infamous Gulf of Tonkin. Frank Zappa. Frank's father made chemical weapons for the military in World War II. He grew up on Edgewood Arsenal military base in Baltimore before they moved to California. He plays host to virtually every musician that passes through the canyon. Let's bring up Frank Zappa because I didn't know what Frank Zappa looked like. Here's Frank Zappa. Not too good looking of a guy, if you ask me. Got a big nose, not a good looking guy. Okay, he signs many artists on his record labels. He buys the log cabin, which was the early commune, had all the tunnels and the caves. Of course, he had total contempt for the hippie movement, hated it. He was very pro-military and authoritarian control, which is odd because, right, he's a leader in the hippie movement. His manager is Herb Cohen. Herb came from Brooklyn to LA right before the music scene. Of course, Cohen is a former U.S. Marine, traveled the world before coming to California. He spent time in the lovely Congo in 1961. That same time, the Prime Minister Lumumba was, of course, being tortured by our CIA. He claims, though, he was vacationing there while also supplying arms to the people in defiance of the CIA, I'm sure. I'm sure they didn't want him to do that. He was just a lone wolf supplying military-grade weapons to people in the Congo. Then Frank's wife, Gail Zappa, her real name is Adelaide Sloatman, hails from a long time of career naval officers. Father worked on the classified nuclear research for the U.S. Navy. So I don't know if I fully believe the nukes aren't real theory yet, but there's a good chance. They lie about everything. So God knows what she actually what her husband or her father was working on. Well, she doesn't look good there. I'm showing a picture of her now, 70. Okay. She often would hear voices in her head, which is going to be a big pattern we're going to keep running into: mental illness or created mental illness and people that are very into the truther world. I'm going to go to MK Ultra. She attends kindergarten class with who? Jim Morrison. So Frank Zappa's wife attends the same kindergarten as Jim Morrison. That is wild. And then Morrison also attends the same high school as John Phillips and Cass Elliot of the Mamas and the Papas. Wow. Mamas and the Papas organized Monterey Pop Festival, gave the media the exposure, the first real look at like the music and the hippie fashion because of that pop festival. They was instrumental in luring underage runaways to the Haight-Ashbury in the Summer of Love in 1967, which wasn't so loving. But again, I'm going back to music influences our youth and our culture. Charlie Manson also hung out at the log cabin and home of Mama Cass Elliot. John Phillips of the Mamas was another child of the military-industrial complex, son of a U.S. Marine Corps Captain Claude Phillips, whose mother claimed to have psychic telekinetic powers. So weird. My mom thinks that too. It's a joke. My mom doesn't think she does. John attended a series of elite military prep schools in D.C., accepted to the Naval Academy, marries Susie Adams. Now, Adams, wouldn't you know, she's a direct descendant of John Adams. Susie's father, James Adams Jr., was involved with spy stuff in the Air Force in Vienna. Susie would find work at the Pentagon with John's older sister. So let me just say, John marries Susie, who works in the Pentagon with John's older sister. So maybe that's how they met, right? Okay. And then another sister of John also worked for the federal government. And then brother of John was a Marine vet on the police force in Alexandria. Phillips found himself also in Cuba, in Havana, fighting for Castro for a while, as all random Joe Schmoes do that have no ties to military intelligence or military. Then he returns to Florida and Jacksonville, conveniently next to the Mayport Naval Station. Stephen Stills, from Buffalo Springfield, and Crosby, Stills, Nash. Pulling up big Steven Stills here. He's a little bald, but he's a good-looking guy. He's an okay-looking guy. He wrote the For What It's Worth. There's something happening here. I think that's the song. What it is. But anyway, follow-up single will be named Bluebird. And now for some really advanced truth or knowledge, that was the original code name of MK Ultra. So Bluebird, again, just probably a total coincidence, conspiracy, or just a coincidence. Product of another career family, of course, spent much of his childhood in El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama Canal Zone, and other Central America areas with his father. Educated on military bases and elite military academies, he was said to have an abrasive, authoritarian personality. He also said he served time. This is cool. He said he served time in the jungles of Vietnam. And the newspapers would be like, oh, he's so drugged up. He doesn't know what he's talking about, since he came to Laurel Canyon before we stepped foot with uniformed soldiers in Vietnam. But ignoring the fact, as the mainstream media, Mockingbird media does, that thousands of advisors, CIA, special forces, have been active in the country for years before the first uniformed ground troop. So again, maybe he was, his dad liked to vacation in South America, and he liked to vacation in Vietnam right before, we topple governments, right? David Crosby, founding member of the Byrds, Crosby, Stills, Nash. Well, he's a son of an Annapolis graduate, World War II military intelligence officer, Major Floyd Delafield Crosby. He was in Haiti when the Marines controlled the country. And his family lines, I think Bob was touching on this on my show. David Van Cortlandt Crosby is his real name. He's related to the Van Cortlandt, Van Schuyler, and Van Rensselaer families. Who are these Van families? Well, they have wielded power for the last 225 years in America. Family tree of senators, congressmen, state senators, assemblymen, governors, mayors, judges, Supreme Court justices, Civil War generals, Revolutionary War generals, signers of the Declaration, members of the Continental Congress. Of course, throwing a few high-ranking Masons in there. Direct descendant of Alexander Hamilton. And if you don't know, Alexander Hamilton was key in, he was the big banks. He grew up in the Bahamas, didn't know his father. There's word that he's a Rothschild secretly. He fought for the banks. Not a good guy. Not a good guy. I wrote big bankers, little B word boy, but you get the picture. So David Van Cortlandt Crosby, very into guns, has a huge collection of them. One time discharged at another human, but he's a hippie. He loves peace and love. Jackson Browne, another singer guy, son of, I don't know who Jackson Browne is, but son of a career military family. Father was in post-war Germany, which means he's part of the OSS, because that's the only people. Here's Jackson Browne. Those are the only people in Germany post-World War II before the CIA started. They're trying to, at this time, the OSS was trying to maintain as much of the Nazi infrastructure as possible while shielding war criminals from capture and prosecution. I don't know if there was only, I think, in the Nuremberg trials, 11, I think, were tried, and the rest worked for NASA. So, Werner von Braun, he didn't build, he built rockets, but he had a gun held to his head. So we let him, make our rockets that supposedly put us on the moon. More guys: Gary Beckley, Dan Peake, Dewey Bunnell. Beckley's dad was Air Force Base near London, intelligence operation. Both of the other guys, Dan Peake and Bunnell, both their fathers served in the Air Force on a London base. Mike Nesmith of the Monkees and Corey Wells' Three Dog Night both arrived in LA after serving in the Air Force. Nesmith, even though he was a hippie, had inherited a family fortune of $25 million. Graham Parsons, who we're going to get into a lot, he's got a crazy story. He replaced David Crosby in, here's Graham. Kind of looks like a girl, but Graham was the son of, he'll replace David Crosby in the Byrds for a little, son of Major Cecil Ingram, Coondog Connor, military officer, bomber pilot, flew over 50 combat missions, heir to a Snively family fortune, which was the wealthiest in Florida at the time. Snively groves a third of all citrus groves in Florida. And now I know I'm mentioning all military sons and daughters and wealth and privilege, but it wasn't all that. So you also have William Stumpy Zevin, son of crime lieutenant for infamous crime lord Mickey Cohen. At the time, there was no, and also which was crazy about this was, again, at this time in Laurel Canyon, there was no music industry. The music centers or epicenters were Nashville, Memphis, New York. Then just out of nowhere, and after they put Lookout Mountain, and then right, I think the Beach Boys started a little before. They were like late 50s, early 60s. But then the Laurel Canyon becomes the exact location that all these people flood to in a matter of a year, 2 years, and create the power center that becomes the hippie movement. Power of the people, call this a counter. This was a nice, wild quote. Sammy Davis Jr. Everyone there at one time or another had been into Satanism, or like myself, had dabbled around the edges for sexual kicks. And I know Sammy Davis Jr. was a Satanist for a little while. But just again, so this is called the counterculture. This is called the anti-establishment, anti-whatever. And you see it's being propped up by all military intelligence kids or military intelligence workers. So I guess you can make the argument, well, maybe they hated that lifestyle and they all did this. And I would say keep listening, because we'll find out that that's definitely not true. But it's just funny, like even the movements we have today, like Antifa or whatever you want to, I hate getting into politics, but who are they really? The real counterculture movement now is to get married, have a family, go to church, love your wife, have a family, pray to God. That's the counterculture, because no one supports that. What does big business support? You see what they changed all their colors to this month? They always do this. Is there one that says, find a wife, it's not going to be easy, love them, be a family, raise many children, promote unity, don't promote, degeneracy. Okay, sorry. I'm just feeling real strongly about this today. So I kind of just said that. So the mass appeal of these singers gave them a voice in public political affairs, which before this didn't really happen. You see it even more today. LeBron James, every person has an opinion, and it's always the woke agenda, except for like Chris Pratt. He says some stuff, but I'm sure, again, you need some opposition. But you see how crazy Hollywood is. This is where it started, like this. And I already touched on this. Do you think they would allow people with this much power to just say what the truth, like what they actually believe? Last thing, like Mark Ruffalo tweeted out, they're genociding Palestinians. And then 2 days later, he had to revert that and take that back. I mean, that's like, anyway, that's like all the proof. They can't say what they want. Okay. Yeah. And then the other response to people saying like, well, they just broke out against their parents. Well, then how come they never spoke out about their parents and the violence that they were behind? Jim Morrison never once mentioned that his father was lying about an event that caused the death of hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese and thousands of Americans. Did Zappa ever call it his father about making chemical weapons that would create lifelong effects? So these people either like were pushed in to be co-intel, to like, start a movement, to create a movement, or they eventually became compromised. I'm leaning towards more they were propped up and put into this position. And this ties us to every movement that we have today. Q, liberty movements. Like, even the truther movement, they like, I always bring up Edge of Wonder, but these groups that have all this clout, they had over 100,000 subscribers after like a month being on YouTube. Or all these people though, they're propped up, a lot of them, because again, they have all these ties. They're pushing like an agenda. And I just don't think that, and they like the COINTELPRO kind of movement, they infiltrate everything. Like if somebody started like a liberty movement, like whatever, well, I don't know. I don't want to like say them because I don't want to get like docked and like watched even more. But you don't think that half the group's going to be feds or have some ties to feds, then you're joking, right? Like that's why I always say the only solution, it isn't to organize. You'll be arrested. They'll ply you with like everything that you want, and then moments before you take action, they would arrest you. So the best thing you can do is get married, move out to the home like farm, and pray to God, be a loving neighbor, all those things like that. Okay. So the anti-war movement was obviously co-opted. So instead of having intelligent, articulate people that were anti-war, they provided reasons why they're anti-war, you turned it into this drug-fooled craziness of unwashed people that people just laughed at. And this is the exact same thing as the Q thing. Q has set back the truther community even further. Now, anything that we speak out about that's the truth, they label it as a QAnon conspiracy. And immediately people have been trained to think January 6th, QAnon, and that's it. That's it. It's all the same. It's like the same playbook. These people aren't original, right? They do the same thing over and over again. The anti-war movement was already underway before the first hippie came in. So like in Michigan, 1965, there were no hippies. They had a teach-in, of well-respected, well-dressed, intelligent, articulate kids. That's who attended college back then. And then you flooded this well-meaning people that truly wanted to stop war with acid, hippie music, and then all the older generation laughed. And the current, the news painted them as crazy people, which they kind of were, but just like you, right? Jerry Brown, a longtime resident of Laurel Canyon, he lived close to Wonderland Avenue, where 4 on floor murders is the most bloody and brutal multiple murders in history. I think I'm just saying a lot. Yeah. So Sharon Tate murders, they were a couple miles west of Laurel Canyon. Victims Folger and Frykowski, they were the other Manson murders. Sebring, part of the Manson murders, was Jim Morrison's hairdresser. One of the investors was Mr. John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. The night of the murder, Phillips and a few people of Three Dog Night had set up a drug buy and at the Manson murder house, but they fell asleep and never made it. They never made it there. Charles Tex Watson, who led the carnage of murders, lived on Wonderland Avenue in Laurel Canyon. He crafted hair pieces for upscale Hollywood clientele near Benedict Canyon, while Sebring, and he lived in Laurel Canyon, while Sebring, Manson murder, created hair pieces for upscale Hollywood clientele near Laurel Canyon and lived in Benedict Canyon. So they're just like the same person, but reversed. And I think that's what they do. They like create stories, create prototypes, which we're going to see. They create a prototype of a character they want, and they know how this will get the response it'll get. So one became the killer of Sebring, and the other became a victim, right? Just odd. I'm just saying they create, yeah. Other weird stuff that happens in Laurel Canyon. This was before it, but another murder. Harlow, a famous star at 21 in 1932, 2 months later, her husband catches a bullet to the head, sprawled naked in a pool of his blood. His corpse is, of course, drenched with his wife's perfume. Her managers come and clean it up. Scenes repeated when Sebring and Freds would come to the same home that this murder happened in and would clean up before officers investigated the Tate murders. And that of the lady's husband, Harlow, that was written off as a suicide, which will be a pattern that we're going to keep seeing over and over again. She was never called as a witness. And then Burns' other wife, she boarded a boat to Sacramento, and she was seen floating belly up in the river. Also suicide. Harlow died at 26 because of bad kidneys, something that happens a lot. Her godmother was Bugsy Siegel's daughter. Godmother to Bugsy Siegel's daughter, Millicent. Other deaths before the Sebring property was a man who committed suicide in some fashion, drowning in the pool, a maid swinging from a rope, all suicide. So that lady happened in this house. So the point I'm making with that is either it's haunted, which would lead me to believe there's some occult significance to this home, and that's my theory, is that these locations are strategically picked. And I know that's a weird tie into military intelligence, but if you haven't learned already, there is a deep tie between military intelligence and the occult world, right? Lady Diane Linkletter, daughter of Art Linkletter, who was a screen idol lady, silent film star. Lenny Bruce, Sal Mineo, another person, all found dead in the homes in the mouth of Laurel Canyon between 66 and 76. Only 2 of those are listed as murders. Navarro was killed in a ritualistic fashion on Halloween Eve. Inger Stevens, another person, dead on April 30th, which is Walpurgisnacht on a cult calendar. That was a suicide, but she decided to propel herself through a decorative glass screen. So, she killed herself and then decided to jump through a glass screen. Diane Linkletter jumped out of her window because LSD made her think she could fly. And if you've ever taken acid, you can see why that's probably pretty highly improbable. That was like the big anti-drug story in middle school. And yeah, so we know, like, she obviously, that it was just a story to, like, I don't know. It's also confusing because they like send these PSAs to not do drugs, and then they also push the drugs. I think they just play both sides of the coin. But I'm saying these stories because all these people die in weird fashion, right? Lenny Bruce died in morphine poisoning, 1966. All of his unreleased material fell into the hands of Frank Zappa. Phil Spector, he's like a name I always hear. Here he is. I think he does a lot of Motown stuff, but whoa, he looks like a nut job. Unsavory character who had a team of studio musicians dubbed the Wrecking Crew. These were the actual musicians behind the Monkees, the Byrds, the Beach Boys, the Mamas and the Papas. Okay. All these people, though, just tie. You understand. Chapter 3. Okay. The Laurel Canyon death list. So we're going to have a lot of these people. Maureen Elizabeth Habe. And I read this Manson book, which you should check out. The CIA. It's the new one. The guy was on Joe Rogan. I read that a long time ago. It was so wild. Super. It all ties into this stuff. So it was really interesting. Basically just says how Manson was military intelligence, or he wasn't, but he was MK Ultra'd. It was like an experiment, right? So Habe, she had her body carved up and tossed into a heavy brush as a 17-year-old. Her father was Hans Habe, who emigrated from fascist Austria in 1940, married General Foods heiress, and studied psychological warfare at the Military Intelligence Training Center. Created 18 newspapers in occupied Germany under the direction of OSS. Kind of sounds like the Epic Times, right? Christine Hinton, killed in collision September 1969, was girlfriend of David Crosby, founder of the Head of the Birds Club, daughter of a career Army officer. Other GF Crosby was Shelley Rocker, who grew up on a Hamilton Air Force base. More weird deaths. Guy stabbed 157 times. Body was right next to Hans Habe's daughter. Just continue. Jimi Hendrix. Ooh, that's a good. This was wild. I didn't know this. I think I'm going to make a shirt that says "That's wild" because I say that all the gosh darn time. Jimi Hendrix. He was, still loved today, right? I mean, he had some okay music, like Purple Rain. I know that one, and the Sheriff one, right? I don't know. But anyway, he lived in this sprawling mansion just north of the log cabin. And what do you know? He has a stint with the U.S. Army in the 101 Air Force Division, which was a super division. released 1 year after. He just wasn't a good soldier, dude. He wasn't a good soldier. You know, he was forced to go in the military because of his court order, but they said, you know what, you're not a good soldier. You can get out of there. That story changes all the time. Jimmy sometimes said he got kicked out because he sprained an ankle during a parachute jump. He also claimed he faked being gay to earn early release. So you can see, you know, if that was that easy, but we'll get into that more as well. Jimmy, when he died, the first person his girlfriend called was Monica Danneman, who was his GF called Monica Danneman, which was Eric Burden of the Animals. Eric had relocated to LA. He took over the ringmaster duties of Zappa in the log cabin. A prostitute that was a groupie, Devin Wilson, that was with Jimmy a day before his death, plunged from an 8th floor window of a New York Chelsea hotel. She just couldn't take the death. And then manager Michael Jeffrey in 1973 killed in a midair plane collision. He had organized crime connection, worked for the CIA. They're one and the same. They both relied on each other to exist. Funneled Jimmy money to the Bahamas. Jimmy's money to the Bahamas for drug trafficking. Danneman, the girlfriend of Hendricks, was the daughter of a wealthy German industrialist, found dead in her home in a Mercedes. So I remember this quote before I keep going in that CIA Charlie Manson book, like live freaky, die freaky was like the saying there. And I could see that, you know, you live in this seedy drug world, like logically you're going to have more deaths. But my response or retort would be to that is all these deaths, everyone that's connected with these people dies, every single one. And they're not all drug overdoses. There a lot of them are clearly hits that are done, and like hit squads, I don't think would do, like, it's just all the key figures, every single one, as we're going to keep going, has key ties from being to intelligence to the military. Like, what are the odds? That's such high odds. I mean, it's almost as high as odds as Earth forming from a Big Bang explosion, right? Jim Morrison, who's the Doors, son of one of the biggest psyops that ever happened. His details have changed over the years, but the same day his father delivered the keynote speech at a decommissioning ceremony for this aircraft carrier was his death, the day he died. Or they just took him out and he went undercover, or like left the circle. He did his job. He did his tour, right? A few years after Jim's death, his law wife, Pamela Corson, also dropped dead as well, heroin. Maybe she left the system too. He was an avid student of the occult, fondness of Crowley, read all he could about incest, Satanism, and he's a member of the 27 Club, just like Hendrix. Brandon DeWild, good friend of David Crosby and Graham Parsons, plowed under a flatbed truck. He was like a Hollywood actor since Child 8. He was with the Young Turks, who we're going to get to later. Zappa's housekeeper, she 1972 alleged drug overdose. Just all these people everywhere that, like, it's either everyone in their circle did drugs, hung out with drug dealers, or people that knew too much after they were decommissioning the plant. It just was going with itself. They took him out. This guy, Danny Whitten, who was a guitarist and vocalist with Neil Young on this band Crazy Horse, he supposedly overdosed. He was fired by Neil Young that day. Phil Spector gave him $50 and put him on a plane back to LA. And when he landed, he died moments after. Bruce Berry, a roadie for CSNY, heroin OD. Oh, this was the guy. He just went out to Maui to deliver a shipment of cocaine to Stephen Stills, doing God's work, then sent back to LA, and he got killed, on the way back. Brother to Jan Barry and Dean Torrance, who played a part in the fake kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr., which happened a couple weeks after JFK. Good to that's just like the Fauci emails. They do this to divert attention away from a topic that they don't want you talking about. Because there's anything they do, they don't let anything out they don't want let out. It's just what they do. They distract us. Just like with Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky happened after that story that by Gary Webb broke. This is what they do. Clarence White was a guitarist with the Byrds, gets run over by a drunk driver in 73. The immediate family member of his was employed at Edwards Air Force Base. The driver who killed him gets a 1-year suspended license for killing him. 1 year suspended license, no jail time. Now you get like 7. Graham Parsons, international submarine band, played with the Byrds, Flying Burritos, ODs on a speedball in 73. I think I already pulled up. His body is stolen from the LAX airport by the Burrito road manager, Phil Kaufman, taken back to this Joshua Tree Hotel and ritually burned on the autumnal equinox. Kaufman, of course, was a prison buddy of Charlie Manson's at Terminal Island, who lots of people seem to end up at Terminal Island. Released at Terminal Island in 68, meets back up with Manson 1 year earlier. Just before 58, Father Graham sent his family to Florida. Next day, he catches a bullet to the head. It's recorded as a suicide. He sent him away to be kind. That's what he did. Mother married Robert Ellis Parsons, adopts Graham Parsons and his sisters. 6 years later, Graham's mom dies after a sudden illness lands her in the hospital. It was immediately after a visit from her husband. And you're going to see this pattern over and over and over and over again. All these people have someone close to them dies, and you still see that today, right? Kanye West, Billie Eilish. I don't pay attention to new music, but now I'm gonna make sure we pay attention. If you guys probably can name more than I can, but they all have someone close to them that dies, like that's right before their superstardom, right around there. Robert marries stepdaughters. So Graham's dad, Robert, marries stepdaughter's teenage babysitter. Nice. Graham attends Harvard University, drops out to form a submarine band, because a Harvard drop. He just loved music so much. Heads to Laurel Canyon, dies in 73. His sister eventually dies as well. The whole family just gets killed or just dies coincidentally. Mama Cass Elliot. She's so important in this story as she is like, the Hotel California. That's that one and a few others. Doesn't look what I thought she looked like. She was the Earth Mother of Laurel Canyon, musicians, Mansonites, young Hollywood stars. She was the wealthy son of a State Department official, drug dealers, unsavory LAPD characters. Okay. Died in, I don't know what that meant. Earth Mother. She hung out with all these people, musicians, Mansonites, drug dealers, LAPD characters that were described as a hit squad. Died in a London home of Harry Nilsson, 1974. Nilsson also drank with John Lennon. 4 years later, in the same London flat, Keith Moon also dies at 32, just like Mama Cass Elliot, in the same home. What are the odds of that? What did Cass die from? Well, it was a heart failure. It's because she choked actually on a ham sandwich. Yeah. Wouldn't you know? Probably more likely she knew where all the bodies were buried, right? Figure of speech as I'm going. Keith Moon died of a massive OD of a drug used to treat alcohol withdrawal. And I know that now they prescribe a week benzodiazepine for that. My previous addiction knowledge is showing, but maybe back then they used barbiturates. Amy Gossage, Graham Nash's girlfriend, murdered in her San Francisco home, stabbed 50 times and bludgeoned beyond recognition, as most murders go. Amy's murder was blamed on Eben, bloodstained clothes. Eben. Oh my gosh, guys. I don't know where I'm going with Eben. I think it's her Oh, it's on her brother. Yes, it's been her brother. That horrible 50 murder stab times was blamed on her brother. And he, of course, was conveniently had blood-stained clothes and a hammer sitting on the porch of his apartment when they found him. It seems pretty easy if you ask me, probably too easy. So Tim Buckley, he signed to Frank Zappa, managed by the good old Herb Cohen, died of an overdose, 1975. He made it all the way from DC, son of a World War II hero. He dies penniless. Cohen steals all of his money. Has a son, Jeff Buckley, who died at 30 in a drowning incident. A lot of drownings. We got to teach people how to swim more. I was a very competitive swimmer growing up. Bobby Fuller 4. This story was wild. All these and I'm not just naming like cherry picking names, right? Like this is the crew that was the hippie movement. So like they either, again, the worst life decisions of the gosh darn world, or there's more to that story. So I fought the law and the law won, and I can speak to that claim that the law will always win, and very rarely will you win. As my many court dates and other things, you cannot fight the law. Those stories of people like getting off are because they're millionaires and they're paying somebody, because you won't win. He was found dead in his car after being lured away with a 2 a.m. phone call. He commits suicide supposedly at 23. He's doused with gasoline. Okay, so he's including in his mouth and his throat, the inside of the car. There's an open book of matches. Now, conclusion would be that he set himself on fire. No, he did not. He actually shot himself. So the police ruled it a suicide, even though the gas that was discovered was poured after his death, but and then shoved down his throat. So it sounds like someone was probably trying to get rid of evidence, but no matter. Police said it was a suicide. It was not a suicide, but an accident. Oh, it was an accident, whatever that means, whatever the hell that means. So he died from not pouring the gasoline and starting the fire. But anyway, Janis Joplin, heroin overdose, 1970, a Landmark Hotel, given supposedly a hot shot, which is like a shot that's much stronger. So that happens all the time now with like the fentanyl, but back then it was more heroin. It's easier. Granted, like people can make mistakes making their things. So maybe, I try to always give like the logical credence or like some credibility, right? Her father was a petroleum engineer for Texaco. Here's Janis Joplin, just so we know. Not good looking either. I have to say, not good looking either. Dated crusader on all immoral things, William Bennett. Sounds like my kind of guy. Morrison, she also died at 27. So 27 is Morrison, Hendrix, Wilson, Joplin of this time. I know there's others that have been added, like Amy Winehouse and someone else. Dwayne Allman and Barry Oakley of the Allman Brothers, killed on motorcycle crashes, October 29th and November 11th, almost, right around each other. So the first guy, obviously, that didn't scare him away, and he was riding bad. Allman was the son of Willis Allman, U.S. Army sergeant who was murdered by another soldier near Norfolk, Virginia. So there's that death of a parent again that we see, 1949. Ronald Pigpen McKernan, founding member of the Grateful Dead. Early names were the Zodiacs and the Warlocks. I'm sure he didn't like the occult at all. He's a member of the 27 Club, died of a GI hemorrhage. A few more of these. Graham Bond, two more, because this whole chapter. I'm just naming all these crazy deaths. Graham Bond, founding father of 1960s R&B in the British. He believed he was the biological son of Aleister Crowley, thus loved the occult. Pete Ham, singer-songwriter for Badfinger, hung swinging by a rope. First signed by the Beatles' own Apple label. The first song was written for him by McCartney, became a huge hit, committed to vinyl by Larry Lennon's sidekick, Henry Nilsson. same one whose London flat served the death of Mama Cass, Keith Moon. Within a few years, it went down and he turned up dead in his garage, 27. Beatles, nor their record label, the Warner Brothers, ever made a statement. And 1 month later, his girlfriend, gave birth to a daughter. 8.5 years later, his bandmate and co-writer of Without You was also found swinging from a rope. So again, am I cherry picking? I don't think so. Like, these are huge names. There were some names that I never heard also in that group, but just death after death, and everyone dies, yes. But does everyone die? Suicide, drugs, murder, odd murders, odd suicides, the odds of famous people, like the regular people, but anyway, okay. Related lives and relative deaths. Judy Lynn Still, she was born in Studio City, California, not far from Laurel Canyon in 1944. She was compared to Joni Mitchell and Carole King. Not a single obituary published about her when she died. Judy's father was Bud Sill. He was the cameraman for Paramount with numerous Hollywood connections. He moves to Oakland when Judy was young, opened a bar, Bud's Bar. And so again, like this template kind of thing, Judy, like I said, she was the precursor of Carole King and Joni Mitchell. Well, Bud, her dad, was operated a side hustle. He was selling rare animals in the 40s, 50s, which required him to spend much time in South America. So most likely, I don't think many people in the 50s and 40s are buying tigers for their house, but spending a lot of time in South America during when we're toppling governments, you could see how maybe he was probably involved with some things. Bud dies in 1952 when she was 8. So there's that death we're looking for. Some say pneumonia, some say heart attack. Well, older brother took over the family biz. Well, he dies in Central America for unknown reasons. But, just if your father just died in South America, you have to take up the mantle. It's the rule. And yeah, so the mom married Ken Muse, who was an Academy Award-winning animator, violent alcoholic. At 15, Judy runs away and lives with an older, let's pull her up just so we have it. Here's Judy Sills. So she looks like the hippie vibe, straight teeth. She started 15, she runs away, lives with an older man. So sad. Starts doing armed robberies, sends her to reform school, continues her addiction by selling her body. 1963, Judy cleaned up and entered junior college. Here's another death. Mom dies of alcohol or cancer. Back down the spiral she goes to Laurel Canyon to begin her performing career. She gets signed, produced by Graham Nash. The album fails. She starts working with the Monkees on her third album, then disappears without a trace. According to a friend of hers, she had a large ebony cross above her fireplace with racks of candles, a Rosicrucian manuscripts, writings from Crowley, Blavatsky, gifted tarot card reader. And then the last surviving member of her family supposedly commits suicide, but friends say that wasn't the same handwriting. And then at one point, or another quote was, a friend said that Judy began to realize that there was a part of her that wasn't under her conscious control. So why did I tell that whole story there of Judy Sills? Because it's going to tie into everything, but MK Ultra, death, drugs, prostitution, trauma is the point I'm getting at. To split a psyche, you need trauma. And that's what all these people have. And to be a good spy, which I'm going to get into it. But yeah, so I'll get to all this stuff. So these deaths are important. All these people are important. We're going to get that. Phil Oakes, a folk singer, political advocate. Here's good old Phil. Hanging in his sister's home in 1976. Huge leftist, like a singing socialist. His father was a doctor in the U.S. Army, was at various military hospitals, shipped overseas, then discharged. He is immediately institutionalized. Phil didn't return to his family for like 2 years. was subjected to electroshock therapy. They said he returned his dad did. It was returned like a phantom. In 1956, Phil attends a military academy, same place that future serial killer cult leader Gary Heidnik would attend 1 year after Phil's graduation. During this time, Phil's fellow band member, was found swinging from a rope, suicide, as all of these are. Phil, this was a story I was mentioned somewhere. Phil Oak is very important. So Phil, before his dad gets electroshock therapy, his friend commits suicide, he goes to Ohio State University. But before he goes, it's 1958, he gets some plastic surgery to alter his appearance. Like many did in 1958, got plastic surgery. What was the state of plastic surgery in 1958? For the public, probably not very good. But for an elite person that's going to be running some special ops, I'm sure it's very good. Why they wanted to alter his appearance, I don't know. I don't know if I can tell here. I'm just interested now. Pre-plastic surgery. Let's see if anything comes up. Doesn't come up. 1962, months before graduation, he drops out to pursue a career. Released 3 albums under the management of his brother. His brother works with this guy, Billy James, who owned a party house in Laurel Canyon. His career begins to fade. He starts traveling internationally, including a visit to Chile not long before a U.S.-sponsored coup. And then Phil Ochs in 1975, he's out of the limelight, he's sad, and he changes his persona. He adopts the name John Butler Train. And who's John Butler Train? Well, according to Phil Ochs, he was a CIA operative, presented him as a belligerent and right-wing thug. And on the first day, his quote was, "On the first day of summer in 1975, Phil Ochs was murdered in the Chelsea Hotel by John Train for the good of societies, public and secret, he needed to be getting rid of." He began compiling research on shellfish toxin, Fort Detrick, cobra venom, Chantilly Racetrack, hollow silver dollars, New York Cornell Hospital. So to anyone that's not paying attention, this is clearly MK Ultra. To create the perfect spy, what they wanted to do was a man or woman that's physically tough and that they can break their personality. And this is proven. Like, I'm not just pulling this stuff out of my butt. You need to get multiple personalities through hypnosis or through torture. And what do all these people have in common? They lose a parent or a loved one. So this is how it works. So normal waking state is personality A. Personality A, rabid communist, hippie, partier, acid taking. They join the party, they walk the walk, they talk the talk. They are not acting. They are actually this person. They are a hippie, loving, whatever. Then create torture, trauma, and through this and hypnosis and drugs, you are able to create personality B, which is an unconscious personality. This person is authoritarian, pro-intelligence, whatever your lead, they follow whatever beliefs their leader, their CIA op that's working with them feels. And they have this personality B as the advantage where they know all the information of personality A. They're aware that personality A exists. Personality A is not aware that this person exists. So when they go to their communist meetings, they go for their hippie music. When it's done, they go to personality B, or personality B will meet their boss and divulge all inside information. But let's say, because this is not a machine, it's a human being, and the psyche can break. Oh, my Alexa just went off. That scared the shit out of me. Oh my God. She's telling me I'm low on cat food or something. Please ignore this. Oh my God, that startled me so much, guys. Okay, so personality B becomes haywire and emerges as the main person, and now they're not following orders. So I'd say that's a liability that would need to be ended, because now personality A, their spy, everything's just haywire, and that's a liability for the CIA, and so that's a problem that you solve by ending them. So, Phil Oakes, 35, he found that situation. He was swinging from a rope. So hopefully I explained that clearly. That's like how the goal of MK Ultra, what their goal was, what they wanted, and what they, in the end, were definitely successful with. And they probably still do today the exact same thing with our famous people today, right? They don't know it, maybe they do know it, that they're government informants, that they're promoting an agenda, but yeah. It's just one sec here. Let me pull this up. Sorry, I had to take a little break there. It's like a good halfway point, but we ended with Phil Oakes. I'm sure you're still listening, so I don't know why I ended with it. But so Stacy Sutherland, another example, lead guitarist, founding member of the 13th Floor Elevators. Ooh, let me share my screen as well. And Stacy Sutherland is a boy, though. So, don't get confused by the Stacy name. But anyway, shot dead, 8/24/78, very popular. Sutherland imprisoned on drug charges, drank after that. Was 32 when he was shot and killed by his wife, Bunny. Ruled accidental. She picked up a loaded handgun, disengaged the safety, pointed at her husband. And then this was real interesting, of this 13th Floor Elevators, which obviously occult symbolism there. Rocky Erickson. Roger Kennard Erickson is the name. So this guy, musical prodigy, okay, severely abused as a child, as we have seen many times before, sexually abused by his father, coined the term psychedelic rock, first used like feedback distortion, major influence on Janis Joplin, good looking, charismatic guy back then, not now so much, but this guy's a sad story. He began career, sorry, I'm watching my sister-in-law's dog. Began music career as he dropped out of his high school weeks before graduation, forms this band with a psychology student, Tommy Hill. Not like today's psychology students who just pick that when they have nothing to do. That was like a joke, Okay. He was the driving force behind the psychedelic band. Tommy Hall was an advocate of LSD and mushrooms like Leary. He was a devout follower of Scientology. So already CIA ties, as we see in this group, probably like his handler in a sense. Rocky suffered a complete mental breakdown, speaking gibberish in 68, diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, got electrotherapy, voice telling him to do horrible things. Somehow he escaped with a friend, started using drugs, got caught with a single marijuana joint, pled not guilty for insanity, due to insanity, which is like a crazy thing to have to do, even in this time, for a single joint. Maximum State Facility, more electrotherapy, Thorazine, put together a prison band. Like one guy killed 2 kids, one raped and stabbed his mother, another child rapist. And again, he was there for a single joint. Comes back in 72, a shell of his former self, formed a new band, Rocky Erickson and the Aliens. So again, we're tying CIA with aliens. I think of Demons and the Evil One. That was his one album. The Devil You See Is My Friend. Believe an alien had taken possession of his body. Developed this obsession with junk mail. He would like obsess over it. Got charged with mail theft after taking from neighbors. Eventually released to his brother. And then ZZ Top and REM released a tribute album for him, Where the Pyramid Meets the Eye. Anyone, we can understand what the pyramid meets the eye is, a huge Masonic connotation here. So I know that part might have been a little long for some people. Now we're going to get back like into more interesting people with CIA. I know that was like a lot of death, but again, just setting this up that all these people have these patterns and we all have sad things that happen in life. Absolutely. But I don't know anybody really that became famous and that, or I don't know. You understand, like the ability for all these people to have this trauma involved with their life, whether a death or a rape or underage prostitution, all this stuff. And so these people were so huge to the hippie movement, and they're all tied. So Vito and his freakers, or as the chapter. I'm just pulling up. All right, Vito and his freakers. I just want to have a good photo of it and his freakers. So Sunset Strip, watching the birds, you had all these people that became famous. Jack Nicholson, who we're going to get into too, who's crazy backstory. But so you had Vito and his freakers. So they were this acid drenched group of people, uh, all lived together. They played roles in the success of all these bands. Okay, all these bands. Zappas, Jim Morrison, definitely David Crosby, and the Birds, like I said, were super close to the Freakers. So Vito and his wife, Suzu, and Carl Franzoni had like 35 or so dancers, okay, which livened up the Birds' early gigs because they really couldn't play that well. And these were the first hippies. They had this communal living, large orgies, free-form dancing. So they became the archetype of the hippie. So who was Vito, right? So Vitas Alfonso Paleckis, born of a Lithuanian sausage maker in 1913, came from Massachusetts, robbed a movie theater, was released to the U.S. Merchant Marines. 1946, arrived in L.A. 2 years, something interesting happened in Florida where marriages had to be posted for 3 days, like on the city hall. I guess to make sure like no one would argue the marriage. Winthrop Rockefeller, the fourth John, he was John D. Rockefeller's fourth son, was marrying a lady named Eva Sears. And they said, oh, she's from a good family line, blue blood type. Well, she actually lived in Hollywood before moving to Paris, taking a job at the U.S. Embassy. She went by many names in her lifetime, but her parents were Lithuanian sausage makers, and her real name was Javut Paleckis, except that's not really her last name because it's the feminine version of Paleckis. So Eva Paul's father, who married the Rockefeller, the fourth son of John D. Rockefeller, was the brother of Vito's father. So they're cousins. So essentially the king of the hippies is the cousin of John D. Rockefeller and the Rockefeller line. So Paleckis' family missed the wedding. They were making a batch of cheese they were really excited about, and they just couldn't make it to the wedding. Obviously, they were excluded, right? So Vito, he becomes a sculptor, and I'm saying this because clearly Vito, there's a reason why he's the king of the hippies, right? He becomes a sculptor in 1949. 56, he has students. He has 2 children. Marriage fell apart. Then he marries this Susan Cynthia Schaefer, the Suzu. Vito was 48. Sue was 18. Of course, they met at 16. And granted, this is an older time, but again, we're pedophilia, entertainment, they're one and the same, dude. It's just all involved with that stuff. Suzu has a clothing boutique, which is the first hippie clothing, and downstairs was his clay studio, where it was actually more popular because they're having orgies, probably some pedophilia, some sick stuff. And he had a sidekick, Carl Franzoni. And Carl was a son of a Freemason, literally a Mason who carved the monument, who carved many of the monuments in the U.S. Here's good old Carl. He's ugly as hell. And so Freemason, right? Freemason, it all just connects, dude. It all connects. Freemasonry, the occult, the entertainment industry. Also around the troupe was Grail Slopeman, who now I think that's Zappa's wife, Kim Fowley, which is also a man's name. Kim. I don't know many male Kims. Do you guys know any? Son of Douglas Fowley, World War II Navy vet. He went to St. Francis Xavier Military Academy. His dad basically allowed women and men to molest him as a child. There again is our trauma event. God, I have a fly flying around here. He spent some time in the military, then went to the LA music scene, created a young girls troupe. Everyone loved so this guy, Kim Fowley, creates a young 16-year-old or younger girls group playing guitars. His quote was, everyone loved the idea of 16-year-old girls playing guitars and singing about F word. So classy guy, as you can tell. accused of him requiring sexual services for membership in the group, ironically called the Runaways, because that's probably who was joining his group, or sick parents sending their kids to be molested by an old man. So back to the troupe. 1962, they started hitting the scene doing their like weird hippie dance and new fashion sense. There was no like clubs in this area at the time in 1962. It's still predominantly African American bands. But then by magic, just right after Vito creates his club, new clubs start popping up all in the Sunset Strip. And wow, what some forward thinking businessmen, right? So Elmer Valentine, he opened the Whiskey A Go Go nightclub. He was a dirty Chicago vice cop. And then Ciro's nightclub, 1940, so started, or it was like it was an old club. Then it gets revamped. Associate of Bugsy Siegel, very forward thinking men, was host to organized crime, like reopened 1965, just in time for the Laurel Canyon band, the Byrds, to commit a song to vinyl. Issue was, no one even knew it was reopened. It was dead for so long. New bands that nobody knew obviously couldn't bring crowds into an area that wasn't known for music, right? And they weren't very good live. And I know that's going to hurt my dad's feelings because, it's going to hurt his feelings. But yeah, so a lot of these bands sucked, right? They couldn't play the instruments because they're probably not really musicians. So they sounded great on vinyl, but that's because none of the actual band played on the records. There was multi-tracking, overdubs, just like our artists today. I mean, I've never been to like a rap. I think I've been to saw Method Man in concert, but besides that, I've never seen like hip hop. Rap isn't like good in the like in the live show. It's good because all the crowd and all that stuff. I assume that's why people go. I don't really like concerts. Enter Vito and Franzoni's dancers. So they have a great, CIA creates a great band, all military intelligence kids. They need to start this movement to ruin the anti-war movement. See how much power can LSD and all this stuff really have on a nation. So Vito assembles this crew. They're treated like royalty. They're let in. It's like the popular kids at a party. You don't charge them $5 because you need them, or how bars do girls get in free, or frat parties, whatever. They let them in. And that might be an old person statement. I don't know. $5. I'm sure many kids don't have cash on them. They probably just Venmo. Maybe they don't even have to pay for parties anymore. I don't know. I'm old now. So the customers, they came. They heard all this stuff about the Freaks, and they came to see the Freaks because they didn't know the band. Vito, totally underground movement, appears in Life magazine. They were on the Tonight Show, on Joe Pine show, Naked magazines. And Joe Pine, for anyone interested, which was interesting, he paved the way for Bill O'Reilly and like Rush Limbaugh, Hannity. He pioneered that confrontational interview style, one that I would never be able to do because I suck at confrontation. Insulted, demeaned his guest, all those things like that. So Vito. Well, Vito come in every night, like I said, with an entourage of tons of looking girls. And what does it sound like? Vito's bringing these good-looking girls. It's attracting the men. It's attracting people. It's attracting popularity. Who also in this area had a gaggle of girls, good-looking young female women, probably runaways, and had a lot of power over them. Charlie Manson, right? The similarities between these two are literally, again, it's that prototype that the CIA is playing with. He would showed up with these free-thinking 14, 15-year-old girls happy to have sex with band members and other old, gross, dirty men. Vito operated the first crash pad in LA where young runaways were welcome for the night. I'm sure they didn't owe him anything in return. There's a saying in jail, you don't take the honey bun off the pillow, because then you owe a favor. So that's just like this. They're young, naive, ignorant. They think, oh, it's summer of love. This guy's so nice. He's letting me stay at his house. Maybe they're escaping something bad. And now, they know the type they're going for, right? These people are predators. He had a hippie child, 3-year-old Godo was the boy's name, classic name, died supposedly falling through a trap door on the roof of his house and died. And this whole story is so messed up. They probably they were giving it acid as it was as a 3-year-old. Maybe it was high. Vito one night brought out Godo, and they were sitting. This writer Michael Walker talks about this. They passed around the little boy in a naked in a circle with their mouths, introducing him to sexuality. So I don't need to get graphic. You understand what Vito was offering his son to people with. They had an odd reaction when he died. They just went out and partied. They just went out and partied. They did. When asked where Godo was, Vito said he died today. Died on December 23rd, 1966. So right before Christmas morning, but they still went out. Kenneth Anger, who's so key in this, just a Luciferian guy. I've tried to read his books. I think it's like the God Aleister Crowley. That should say enough if you don't know Kenneth Anger. I'm sure you heard his names, but he's just a total nut job. He wanted Godo to play Lucifer in his movie Lucifer Rising, I think. He ended up having to find a new Lucifer, obviously, because Godo died. Picked Bobby Buscioli, who was then a convicted murderer in the Manson murders, of course, because why not? So what brought Anger's eye to this little boy, though, right? Buscioli in prison said some of Anger's film projects were for private collectors. He'd do a little thing that wouldn't be for distribution. Police investigated Anger for producing snuff films, and that got shushed away because I'm sure he has ties. And they all want to do this for some sick reason. Vito had staged one evening in his studio, 2 young girls doing things to each other, like 2 12-year-old girls doing what you can imagine to each other while observing, and everyone, like his followers, are observing them, and he's like talking them, like, just sick, dude. These people are disgusting. This is the hippie movement, right? The people who created the hippie movement are doing this. After that, Vito departed to Haiti, then to Jamaica. There's no extradition. With a new baby, Groovy Nipples Polikas, had a few more offspring. So, like I said, Vito's, before he left the log cabin, and you know who picks up Vito's mantle? Of course, Charlie Manson. Vito's little Lucifer, I said, was replaced with a Mansonite Lucifer, Buscioli. Manson was essentially like the younger version of Vito's, because Vito's was kind of old, maybe like the perfected version of Manson, what they had to do. So these are the similarities. So again, this prototype thing is so huge, and you need to see, I wish we don't have, I guess better now, they're better at covering their tracks in my mind, probably. But I like Isaac Weishaupt's so good at, and I just don't care enough about pop culture to really study these people, because I think they're sick anyway, and I think they suck. But Vito and Manson comparisons, both gurus, both flock very young women, considerably older than their followers. Followers listen to their words like a god. Franzoni, who was Vito's cohort, wear a black cape and refer to himself as Captain Fuck. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to curse. And then Manson would wear a black cape and declare himself god of blank. Both insatiable libido, gave followers nicknames. This is part of the depersonalization process. They're testing out MK Ultra on the public. Vito had Beverly Hills hairstylist. Charlie had a Beverly hairstylist. That was Tex Watson, one of the murders. Infant sexuality, staged live sex shows involving children, as did Manson. Vito encouraged members to drug themselves while he abstained to maintain control. And that's exactly what Manson did. He'd get you all high and then whisper in your ears. And that's how he brainwashed his following. Interesting about this black cape, David Crosby also wears the black cape. And why is he wearing the black cape? Well, the Process Church, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. I hear Dyer talk about it. I like Jay Dyer is so smart. I don't care what you say if he's on InfoWars. He's still a brilliant guy. Read such a good reader. But yeah, he read the final judge. He talks about the Process Church. So they were a cult of the 60s, as you can see, looking like a cult. Formed in 63 as an offshoot of Scientology, prototype. brainchild of Robert Moore, former cavalry officer named Robert, and this lady, Marianne McLean, had an elite prostitution ring with ties to the UK. McLean was married to a Freemason, Sugar Ray Robinson, lived right around the corner of Love frontman Arthur Lee. Group arrived in the States in 68. How convenient in all like the big cities. Interesting about the Process Church, they produced a magazine that favored Hitler, Satan, and Gore. And I think, again, because the intelligence organizations respected what the Nazis were able to do, the science that they were able to do, the brain washing, all that stuff. They had a symbol like a swastika, so you can see right here. Love fascism. There was a death worshiping cults composed of hooded people, always good. Directly connected to the Manson murders, connected to the Son of Sam murders. And why am I bringing this up? Well, processions were recognizable because of donning their black capes. So one would make the assumption if David Crosby likes to wear a black cape, if Carl Franzoni likes to wear a black cape, if Manson likes to wear a black cape, it's probably not just a style that they enjoy, right? So Process Church, all cults, I won't say all cults, probably every single cult, I guess that's all, are started by the CIA and intelligence organizations. So Frank, I said that Frank replaced Vito, Frank Zappa. He also would never get high. The children of Zappa were encouraged, and of his followers were encouraged to watch porn with their parents. When they became teenagers, Zappa's kids were insisted they shower with their guests to conserve water. Must have been a high water bill, I'm sure. See, it's just so disgusting, dude. This hippie movement that people think so fondly of is so dark and disgusting that it's aggravating, right? So hopefully this helps you and you can argue with people, because it's great to wake people up to this truth. Vito and Carl, they eventually resurface in California years later. Of course, they become mayor and director of Parks and Recreation. They were on a TV show, the Gong Show. It's like the precursor of America Has Talent or America Got Talent. I don't know. Brainchild of Chuck Barris. Well, Chuck, who created America Got Talent, was actually on the CIA payroll, served as a chaperone to couples who had won trips on the dating game. What does that sound like? A traveling entertainer. He's a spy. Most likely he carried out assassinations like Houdini, which we will get to later. Isn't that like a juicy detail? Assassinations like Houdini. Taught dance classes at Sonoma College, Vito did. Then during the 70s, the cabin in Treehouse got even creepier after Zappa left. It remained a commune until 81. It burned down. Who paid the rent for 25 years? I'd wager a guess it was probably your tax dollars did. But I guess there's, how do you prove that? I don't know. But it wasn't them. Back to the death of Godo. I told you, he said he fell through his parents' roof at 333 Laurel Ave. He hit his head, had cuts to his head, taken to the hospital for observation in case he had a concussion. And then Vito gets a call a few hours later and he died. That's the story that I think Vito says, or one of the stories he says. You'll see that makes zero. He doesn't continue that story. LA County DA Vince Godo had been given drugs, ordered 2 separate autopsies, revealed that no drugs, but that Godo's death was strangulation due to the child breathing in his own vomit. Vito sued the hospital. He was warned he wouldn't win because the jury would be conservative people and they would see Vito. He lost, and a family member account was that Godo fell through the roof, through the skylight, and the hospital DA insisted on testing Godo for drugs, proving Vito was drugging his own child, and that he had to use a spinal tap that killed him because he was so young. Regardless, all these, Vito's stories, all either he was there or he wasn't there, he got a call or he didn't get a call. So regardless, his son dies. He passed his son around as a sex toy. He drugged his child. Regardless, he dies on the day before Christmas Eve and he goes out dancing the night before. What a peace and love movement. Death certificate also makes no sense. Hemorrhage deep into the mediastinal areas. Liv isn't here, so I can't tell you what that is. Died at 7:30. Accident occurred around 2:30 p.m. No autopsy, of course, until 5 months later. He wasn't buried again for another 5 months later. Just a mess. But Vito, King of the Freaks, Roman Polanski, Charlie Manson, and all these people that do it today, these sickos, pedophilia still runs rampant in the entertainment industry in Hollywood. Again, is it like the chicken or the egg? Is it a prerequisite before you get famous? I think it was there since the entertainment industry started. It goes with power. It goes with this cult that they're all in, this sick, evil cult, whether it's like Luciferianism, whether it's Freemasonry, there's something, right? Regardless, Vito called his attorney before he called the hospital. So that should add, all you need to know. Now the Young Turks, and this we're going to get into Jack Nicholson, which is wild, dude. So as important the Freaks were, there was another group called the Turks. Not like that. It reminds me of that guy. Who's the annoying liberal guy? Turks, he calls his group the Young Turks. You guys know what I'm talking about. He sucks. I don't know his name. He's just sucks so much. They're just another group like the Freaks. So people would gawk at the Freaks or rub shoulders with Peter Fonda and Jack Nicholson, Bruce Dern, Dennis Hopper, Warren Beatty, along with females Jane Fonda, Nancy Sinatra, Sharon Tate. They would help take attention away from the less than stellar performances. James Manfield has direct ties to Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan. He was the creator, for those you don't know. Music wasn't the only ties. Like I said, there was acting also. This movie, The Trip, 1967, it was like an LSD trip. How original in this time. Written by Jack Nicholson. Tons of occult films that are like cult classics. Monkees played the background music of these films, which like they're like this pretty boy cute band, and just it's just like I'm just saying that because like that's not their image, and they're doing the music for that. So the Monkees are like the TV replica of the Beatles. Let's look at the Monkees. I feel all I remember of the Monkees is they're on the Brady Bunch. Jack Nicholson and Hopper were frequent at the house. I guess they're good looking at the time. That one guy's like, he's still on like TV and stuff. Real musicians also try to be a part of the Monkees, like Stephen Stills, a few other people, all rejected. These guys aren't real musicians. They're just like kind of like our boy pop bands of the 90s. Easy Rider movie has starred Nicholson and Hopper. It was based on David Crosby's motorcycle riding. And then there's like a Captain America character inspired by Graham Parsons. And Jeremy Kay worked on the film. He was working on Hell's on Wheels, Scorpio Rising. That's not Lucifer Rising, Scorpio Rising, all Kenneth Anger, Satan's Children, another one. Jeremy Kay was a member of the Solar Lodge, the OTO. 2 weeks after the premiere, the movie cops raided the Solar Lodge compound. They find a 6-year-old boy locked in a 6x6 wooden crate in 117-degree heat, chained to a steel plate for 2 months. There's a can with waste, flies, burned with matches, beaten by bamboo. The cult leader, Georgina Brayton, was going to give the boy LSD and set the hut on fire. And this was condoned by the boy's mother. This has ties to Manson. It occurs 2 weeks before Manson. Just this area, there's something evil like in this area, right? And back to the Turks. They would lure the public out to the new clubs. Bruce Dern was one guy. His godparents were First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, future presidential nominee Alida Stevenson. Grandfather was George Dern, who was the Secretary of War under FDR, became the Secretary of Defense to sound less Orwellian. Mother, Jean McLeish, sister of Archibald McLeish, who served under FDR, Director of War Department. Essentially, he was the Minister of War Propaganda. Archibald was also a Skull and Bones member of 1915. So again, this is Bruce Dern, who's a Turk. His parents are godparents, Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, and grandfather Skull and Bones, all those things. He just wanted to break out, dude. He just wanted to break out. He wanted to live free. Peace and love, man. Peter Fonda, son of Hank Fonda, was a Hollywood liberal actor, nice guy. Of course, Hank was a naval intelligence officer in World War II, wife related to Jane Seymour, who was the third wife of Henry VIII. Throat slashed open with a razor. Pete was 10 when his mom's throat was slashed open with a razor. There's your trauma. Was widow of George Bocraw, the guy he married next, who was married to a CIA operative, Claire Booth. So his dad has all these ties to intelligence, right? Fonda remarried within 8 months to an Italian countess who had an affair with JFK. Her last name was Franchetti. She was the daughter of a consultant to Mussolini, great-granddaughter of Louise Sarah Rothschild. So Hank Fonda married the daughter of a consultant to Mussolini, who was also the great-granddaughter of Louise Sarah Rothschild. So this ties again to show you how they are all on the same team. There is no good side and bad side. They play both sides. Why would a Rothschild support Mussolini, who was on Hitler's team? Right? He wouldn't. Because without conflict, you cannot create change. They don't want nationalism, that's for sure. They want globalism. They want a worldwide, one world government that they control. Just crazy, dude. All these people. That's again, I knew I didn't like. Hollywood has taken a fall, right? Don't you think? That's one good thing that Donald Trump did do, was it did break, and I'm sure he was on their side too, but it broke the spell that Hollywood are these infallible, beautiful people, right? They're evil, dude. They are evil. To get there, you owe somebody something. Hank, eventually another one commits suicide, and then you get Peter Fonda. So he had an easy life. Dennis Hopper married Michelle Phillips of is that John Phillips? Is that Mama Cass? Is Michelle Phillips Mama Cass? Sheesh, now I forget. Michelle Phillips. I think, oh no, she was just in, okay, Michelle Phillips was married, was in the Mamas and the Papas. So Dennis Hopper married her, divorced 8 days later. Hopper would keep her handcuffed and imprisoned for demanding unnatural sexual demands. Healthy guy. Most think Hopper would grow up a simple farmer, because that's what he says. He was raised on a farm. But actually, his father was working in intelligence for the OSS. He was in China. He was in Burma. He was in India. Crazy farmer, right? Father is one of the 100 guys that liberated a general out of Korea. So just a sleepy time farmer, just trying to hang out. Well, after all of his service to his country, he went to sleepy San Diego as what? A postal worker. I'm sure that's all he did. He delivered your mail right next to Camp Pendleton. And Dennis Hopper was a hippie who voted a straight Republican ticket forever. Here's Dennis Hopper. Nancy Sinatra. I like Frank Sinatra's music. I used to listen to him a lot. Daughter to Frank obviously hung out with the mob, which is the CIA. They're all together. Frank was also a client to Jay Sebring, Manson murders. Warren Beatty. Father was Ira Owens Beatty of psychology, professor of psychology, grew up in the DC suburbs outside the largest naval base. Then he also, Warren Beatty, wouldn't you know, he would play football against John Phillips in high school. Wow, there just must be something in the water outside DC, right? He's a good-looking guy, though. Jack Nicholson. Okay, And then I said psychology, especially at this time, MK Ultra. If you work for the government and you're doing psychology, you're learning how to brainwash people. Okay, Jack Nicholson, guys. The crazy Stanley Kubrick boy, Jack Nicholson. Now, dude, this is a story. So first, before I start Jack Nicholson, let's talk Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy, born at home for unwed mothers in Vermont. Father, unknown. Grandparents, because, you know, it was very embarrassing back then, they claimed Ted Bundy as their own. And he became Theodore Robert Cowell. He grew up believing his mother was his sister. He learned in high school that it was actually his mother. Okay, so that's Ted Bundy, and then we know what happens to Ted Bundy. Jack Nicholson, born at an unknown location to an underage, unwed showgirl. Father, mystery. Nicholson's grandparents claimed him as their son, took their name, grew up believing Mother June was his older sister, learned at 37 she was not. June was dead for a decade at that point. He was said to be born in St. Vincent in New York City. No record of such birth at the hospital or the city. He actually has no birth certificate. He actually didn't have any birth certificate. He had a certificate of delayed report of birth filed in 54. So there's really no way to determine who Jack Nicholson is. You don't know, which is very interesting. Very interesting. Drama, famous actor, hung out in the hippie era, has no proof of who he is. So the Young Turks essentially consist of Bonesman, son of OSS officer, son of naval, son of another intelligence, daughter of army intelligence, daughter of a guy who is associated with prominent gangsters, son of a spy collegist, you get it, a guy who didn't exist. Henry Fonda actually got his first acting gig through Dorothy Brando. So you know Marlon Brando is. Sorry, I'm very thirsty and I don't think I have my water. One sec. Okay, yeah. Henry Fonda got through Dorothy Brando. Dorothy Brando's director of a local theater. And then, you know, that's odd. Okay, Henry Fonda, Marlon Brando. Well, they have deeper ties than just that, actually. The ancestors of Marlon Brando and Henry Fonda both arrived in New York at the same time 3.5 centuries ago. Marlon Brando, descendant of Louis Dubois and Catherine Dubois, 1660, New York. They founded this area, New Rochelle. The descendants have been senators, governors, CFRs, first ladies of California, Jimmy Carter, etc. Henry Fonda, descendant of Julius Du Fonda and Hester Johns Fonda, Dutch colonists, 1650, sailed on a ship owned by John Baptist Van Rensselaer. For those of you not paying attention, Van Rensselaer was the family line of David Crosby. Wow. So how deep do these celebrities, royal like ties go? Is this all just pure coincidence? I don't think it is. I think it's much deeper than that. I think these people are put here for a certain reason. And that's why regular Joe Schmoes don't make it in this industry. There's something. You either have to be a part of something, you have to be born of a certain line, and it's just a show. And it's all to warp public perception and public opinion and culture, because there is power in that ability to morph that. Two more odd characters. Jerry Brown. Here's Jerry Brown. And he was and Mike Curb. Jerry Brown was a conservative Republican family, pursued the Jesuit priesthood, as all good people do, captured the California governor's seat in 1959. That's probably not Jerry Brown. Ooh, okay, it is. All right, it is. Here he is. In 1959, he changed the R next to his name to a D, and then he held the seat for another 2 years to trick people. Then he got because there's less information back then, right? Just a newspaper. Then the guy that replaced him did the same thing. He replaced the D with an R, and that guy, who was that, replacing the D with an R, replacing Jerry Brown right in the 60s? None other than Ronald Reagan. That hands the reins back to the Brown family. Edmund Brown was a liberal Democrat, basically just socialists. Just socialists. They're all like that. Then Mike Curb was also, who will tie with Jerry Brown, composer, artist, did a documentary on Laurel Canyon, worked on on Vito's Freaks with Zappa, worked on this documentary of Mondo Hollywood, which was created by a Robert Carl Cohen. And Robert Carl Cohen, who made this movie Mondo Hollywood with Mike Curb, he was in the Army Signal Corps, then on NATO, then Special Services in Germany, did a documentary on Red China, East Germany, Cuba. He is the first Western journalist film person allowed inside communist countries. So I'm sure this movie, the first documentary of Hollywood done by this Robert Carl Cohen, I'm sure it was just to accurately depict what was going on or to warp the young kids' minds yet again. Curb worked on cheap biker flicks alongside a lot of the Young Turks. Curb would eventually work for Jerry Brown. He was his second command. There were two, veterans of the Laurel Canyon scene working side by side in the Governor Mansion. This just shows again how high the pull of the intelligence community goes. I don't think there's a local elections. I think you still could have a chance at change. Beyond that, leaders are selected, not elected, right? Joining Curb and Brown in Laurel Canyon was also Madam Billy Briers. Who was Billy Briers? Well, he was the son of an oil magnate and a part-time producer of gay porn. And you want to know who's one of Billy Briers' biggest clients? Well, J. Hoover, of course. When he eventually gets caught, I think this is probably, I don't know where Billy Briers is. Eventually gets caught in 1973. Confessions of his Johns or his workers identify Hoover as Mother John. Wonderful. And Billy was also a portal of child pornography, just like the rest of Laurel Canyon. Paul Rothchild, key role in shaping the Doors on the band Love. He was Army intelligence. Also produced Janis Joplin. Here's good old Paul Rothchild. Yes. Related. Yep. Here he is again. And then Bjarne Rosting. How does Paul Rothchild and Bjarne Rosting connect? Well, Bjarne was a author of a mass paperback called The Phantom of the Paradise. Here's Bjarne. And what was that about, you ask? Well, Bjarne wrote a book about a inspired music producer who sold his soul to the devil's riches for your soul. What did Paul Rothchild do? He produced Janis Joplin, The Doors, and the band Love. I'm sure it's totally coincidence that Paul and Bjarne both came from the same intelligence unit. One, this rock music producer who reaches extreme power and churning out public opinion, and the other writing a story about a producer who sells his soul to the devil. Same unit. They talked about it beforehand. They just talked about it. Oh, and we're almost done. This is a really good topic to end on. Owsley Stanley III. Who is he? Well, he was an LSD chemist. I love this story. This just, oh God, they mess with us, dudes. They mess with us. They do this stuff they want to change the world in a bad way. He floods the streets of San Francisco and Laurel Canyon with high quality, inexpensive acid. He was never in it for the money. He gave away more of his product than he sold. Always a successful business model, right? Always. And just so those of you who don't know, mushrooms, those things are relatively easy to do it like yourself, like things that are like pot. It's a plant, right? It grows. Acid is like very difficult to do. I mean, unless you have chemistry background, I'd imagine to get, everything like that. So it wasn't an easy thing. Like he wasn't just throwing a seed outside. Now, who is he? Well, August Owsley was the son of Augustus Owsley II, who was a military officer in World War II, then worked in D.C. as a government. So the third was raised in D.C. His father, the first Stanley, was a U.S. House representative, senator. His father was a judge in the Confederacy. His mom was the niece of the governor of Kentucky. So connected. Everyone in his family is a politician, etc. Attended a military academy, gets committed to the psych ward, 15 months. Continuing pattern again. Mom dies while he's away. What are the odds? He drops out again, gets accepted into UVA, then goes to the Air Force, works in intelligence, goes to LA to study ballet, as all did at this time. He gets a job at Jet Propulsion's laboratory. If you guys don't know that, that's Jack Parsons, occult rocketry, who loved Crowley and the OTO. You see, all these people are just intertwined, dude. This was like the biggest CIA operation ever. The story is he made his acid in a Berkeley chemistry lab bathroom. Yeah, he made it in a bathroom. Also made meth. Of course, he somehow, because he's selling, probably regular cops that have no idea. They arrest him. He gets arrested, but they let him off. They give back his lab equipment as well. Produces over 4 million tabs of pure LSD. And who does Mr. Stanley III here hang out with? Well, he hangs out with the Grateful Dead. So he's clearly a CIA plant. Someone's probably cooking it for him. He hangs out with the Grateful Dead. They get a house next to a brothel. Now, what would an mass acid producer and a brothel have in common? And throw in the CIA as well. Oh, that's right. Operation Midnight Climax, where they would drug people without their knowing, watch them, or they would do it to people with power, send them a woman after them to drug them to get their secrets. I'm sure they had no idea they lived next to each other, right? They eventually leave this area because 34 corpses are in the streets. And Owsley was also the financial backer of the Grateful Dead. He works in like radio and sound and military for his intelligence unit. So I'm sure they did no at all studying of sound and radios and the effect on the human mind. I'm sure he did. In 1967, he releases this. There's this chemical called STP made by Dow. It was a nasty hallucinogen. And then he starts making that. Tested lots at Frank Zappa's former home, in Edgewood Arsenal, where he grew up, as a possible bioweapon. He attained the recipe supposedly from Alexander Shulgin, who went to Harvard while serving in the Navy. And Shulgin was a senior researcher at Dow Chemical, later the DEA, because they all worked together. After 1970, Owsley serves like a bare minimum time in prison, probably because they have to do it. He spends it in Terminal Island Prison, the same one as Charlie Manson, Leary, somebody else that we had earlier. And he gets out, continues his sound work, but now in television. And he eventually crashed his car into some trees and died. Probably, again, no too many secrets. So that is today's show, guys. I know it was a long one. I hope you enjoyed it. The next episode, we're going to get into like Houdini and all this other crazy stuff. I just have to type those notes, so I'm already there for it. And I said it like 10 times during the show. But dude, everything that is mainstream, is promoted, is on Netflix, is on all these things. Think about what you're watching, because they put it out for a reason. And maybe not everything's calculated, but the culture that's created around it is for a reason. And just like now, we see these alien stuff coming out. Everyone's talking about aliens. Well, there's a reason why everyone's talking about aliens, because they're doing something with it. They've been planning this for years. Why do you think there's alien movies all over? There's they do this. They form public opinion for whatever end they want. For this, It created a drug culture. It took a generation and made them addicted to drugs, then to harder drugs, and it led to mass incarceration after this. It broke down the traditional values that were created so far in the United States. Before the 1960s, there was no free love. There was none of this sleeping with multiple partners. God, religion, Christianity was powerful then. And this threw a wrench in everything. And what do we have now? I just saw a video in Chicago of people twerking on a driving police car. Like, it's a domino effect, dude. And do you think it's not going to change? It's not going to change. What power do we have but to hold your family close, to raise them with God in their life, with traditional values, and love your family, be a hardworking, get out of the cities, get out of the suburbs. If you can, find like-minded people, be a good person, live with them, help each other. And eventually society's going to have like two groups: people that subscribe to this woke agenda of promiscuity, of degeneracy, and another group that won't. And they can laugh. People make fun of God and Christianity. They don't make fun of any other religions though, but they make fun of Christianity constantly because they're told by like people they listen to do that, who are told by the government, because they need to break us down so far that we're so degenerate that we fulfill this Luciferian agenda. I know that was a lot. I'm like really into it today with the degeneracy. I was at the mall and there's these photos of like advertising things. And I say this all the time. I don't care. You can do whatever you want that makes you happy. But I don't promote what I do in my bedroom or my life with my, fiance into your face. So why are you doing it the same to me? Go be happy, dude. You're a consenting adult. Do whatever you want. Do it. I don't care. I don't want to be bothered. But I don't feel like for our generation, like give them a chance to figure out what they want, what they want to do, right? And then you have parents pushing their kids in these it's scary, dude. It's scary, and it's working. The free love of the 70s has translated to now. All right, guys. I hope that wasn't too much. Just in a mood, right? So if you want to support the show, you can find me on, Liv texted me. If you want to support the show, you have my website, conspiracyorjustacoincidence.com. If follow me on Twitter, follow me on Gab. I really appreciate all the supporters I have. I hope you enjoyed this. Next episode, we're going to get into Harry Houdini. We're going to get into the Beach Boys, Dennis and Brian Wilson. We're going to get into a few more people. I can't remember everybody. But thanks for listening, guys. Make sure do all you can do to be a better human being, a better person, and increase your skills and whatever it is, your knowledge. Become smarter. Read. Stop following the propaganda. Don't listen to this propagandized Hollywood music. That's what they want us to do. They want us to be fat, lazy, listen to degenerate music that promotes promiscuity, not being faithful to your loved ones. Ugh, God. That's it, guys. All right. Thanks for listening. I'm Jack Allen. Enjoy the show. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll put the other one out probably like Friday. All right. Peace. I'm out.